Welcome to the PFC podcast. I'm your host, Coach Mike Payton. I'm a certified personal trainer, and I'll be giving you tips and tricks on how to improve your overall fitness and help you make progress in the gym. Let's get right into the show. Today we're going to talk about deadlifts. Deadlifts are a very common exercise for people to be like, oh, I don't want to do those. They're really tough and challenging, and also they seem kind of dangerous. A lot of people are afraid of them, which is pretty understandable. It's one of the more complex exercises that you see in the gym. It also tends to be one that you hear about people hurting themselves, and one that can be pretty uncomfortable to do if you don't know how to do it. So it's really understandable that people are really worried about it. But today we're going to break it down. We're going to ask the question, are deadlifts dangerous? Are they unsafe to do in the gym? And as with bench press, like last week, no, it's not dangerous. Deadlifts are a very safe exercise to do. So let's go over 3 things that can prevent injury while doing a deadlift. Number 1, progressive overload. So progressive overload is like progressively increasing the weight over time. So whenever you start out, you might start out with like the bar. That is completely okay, especially if you're trying to learn how to do it. The bar can be a great way to learn, a great place to start. I've had people come in and they use the bar and they're sore for a week. So if it's a new thing for you, you've never done it before, the bar is okay to start. And then slowly over time, so maybe the week after that, you add 5 pounds, you add 10 pounds, so on and so forth. And you keep continually adding a little bit of weight every week, especially if you're starting out, you can do this. Then your body will slowly adapt to that load. So it's not like going to be in shock from the load that you put on it, which a lot of times is what causes that injury. Now, injury is multifaceted, multifactorial, whatever. But this can be a really good way to prevent any injury from happening whenever you're doing a deadlift. So progressively getting stronger and stronger, progressively increasing that load is going to be really good. Another thing that you can do is what we call core bracing. Core bracing doesn't necessarily prevent injury, but it can make you a lot stronger than you would otherwise be. And some good ways to think about core bracing is like you're trying to push your gut out almost. So you're tightening up your abs like you're trying to pull your belly button to your spine, and then you're going to push out within your core. So it's hard to explain verbally, but there's a lot of good YouTube videos out there if you're really confused about it. But just think about like you're trying to get your belly button to your spine, and then you're trying to push everything out against that pressure that you've created. And that can help you to be really strong. It can help you to be really stable, which a lot of people are afraid of instability causing any injury. There's arguments either way for that, but it can be a really good way to make you feel nice and stable whenever you're doing the lift, which a lot of times removes some of that psychological fear of injury, which can be a component. And then proper form. Proper form is another good one. I'd say I would even say that this is at the bottom of these 3, because if you can progressively overload and you feel comfortable doing the lift, like you'll be safe. Especially if you load that bar over time and not like right away, throw in some 45-pound plates on there, seeing how much you can deadlift. But if you want to know how to do proper form, again, there's a lot of good videos out there on YouTube and everything that on this. But the way I would explain it is you want your feet to be about hip width apart, maybe a little bit wider than that, depending on where you're comfortable. And then you want your shoulders to kind of be over top of the bar. You want to have a nice straight back. So you don't want any rounding. Your upper back can kind of round forward. Your shoulder blades can roll forward as you're lifting that bar. But then you want to keep that bar close to your shins as you're at, like whenever you're at the bottom. And then as you lift that up, you're kind of pulling the bar up your body almost. So you're not just like picking the bar up, because if you keep your shoulders over the bar the whole time and you don't pull that backwards, you're going to end up rounding at the low back, which is not what we want. Your low back isn't as strong as some of the other muscles, and so it can cause some things there. But so that's proper form. Just to go through those three things again, to kind of prevent injury, to kind of like give you some psychological boost in your deadlift is: number one, we have progressive overload. Two, we have core bracing. And number three, we have that proper form. Let's talk about like how many times a week like you should be deadlifting. Like once you've gotten these things down, like what are some factors, what are some components of the deadlift that like are going to give you the best results? How many times a week are you going to be deadlifting? So number one, deadlifts are very great for optimal results. You should be deadlifting. Let me say that again. You should be deadlifting. If you're not already, you should be. And there's two reasons for that. Number one, it involves the whole body. You're using your legs, you're using your arms, you're using your spine, all to lift this bar off the ground. So it's a like almost a systemic exercise, if you will. It's not systemic, but you are using so much of your body, and you're training it in a functional pattern. Deadlift is super functional because you pick your kids up off the floor, you pick a basket up off the floor, you are at work and you have to lift a box off the ground. Like there's so many opportunities in everyday life to be like using that pattern. And so training that over time with the deadlift is going to give you some really good results, and it's going to carry over into your everyday life. So you need to be deadlifting for optimal results. And because it uses so many muscles, it can be very growth stimulating to your body. So it'll send a signal to the body saying, hey, we need more bone, we need more muscle, because of how much of your body is used in the deadlift. So that leads to the next point, like how often should you deadlift? You should probably be deadlifting at least once a week at the very least. But any more than that, I would say no. You can do variations of the deadlift. So say you're lifting 3 days a week. 1 week or 1 day you do bench press, 1 day you do squats, third day you do deadlifts as like your main lift. And then on the other 2 days where you're not doing deadlift as your main lift, you could do something like a Romanian deadlift, or a stiff leg deadlift, or some kind of variation that still uses similar muscles, but it's not as taxing, because you have to look at how taxing it is on the body, because it's a very systemic, very strenuous exercise, because you're using a lot of muscles. You have to not do it as much as, say, you could do a bicep curl. You could do a bicep curl I don't know, maybe every day, depending on who you are. But deadlift, you definitely cannot do every single day. So I would say at least once a week, and then the other days of the week, do some variation or some other exercise that can mimic the same kind of motion or use similar muscles. So, like a hamstring curl or a glute ham raise or something along those lines, some kind of hinging exercise. I'm going to give you a few tips. There's two major tips that I want to talk about. Number one would be how to learn the deadlift, and then number two will be on if you have pain whenever you're deadlifting. So number one, ask for help. Ask for help to somebody who knows how to deadlift at the gym. You've seen them lift, you've seen them deadlift. They know how to do it. Don't be afraid. Usually people who are in the gym and they're really big, they're super chill. Like, they want to help you out. They respect that you're just starting, or if you have been doing it a while and still don't know, they'll probably respect you. There's always that outlier, right? That might not be, but don't give up. But yeah, ask for help. I already gave you some form tips. Use those and ask for help if you're still confused. Or if you follow me on Instagram, send me a video of your deadlift, I will be happy to help you. But what if you have pain while you're deadlifting? I would say number one thing is reduce the load. So you have pain in the deadlift. You're like, man, I don't want to deadlift because it hurts. Great. Decrease the load to something that's tolerable. And if you still can't deadlift, so if you were doing, say, 225 deadlift, which is pretty good deadlift, but it hurts, take it down to 135. See if it still hurts. If it still hurts, then use the bar. See if that still hurts, because it might be a pattern, like that motion might hurt versus like the that motion might hurt versus the muscles or the load being the problem. So if it's not the load being the problem, then you're still going to be in pain. And I would say don't stop moving in those same patterns. So the other 2 days of the week, right, that you weren't deadlifting, do RDLs. See if those hurt. If those don't hurt, continue to do those, because those are going to help to strengthen that, like a similar pattern. And then try to slowly progress back to doing the deadlift again. Just like if you were a beginner. So like start with the bar, load a little bit more, do that progressive overload back up to where you can tolerate. And also try to move in some other ways. So work around that injury. A lot of times what can help is like moving that spine in ways that you haven't moved it before. So if you're really stuck in the ways of deadlift, squat, bench, you might do some like iron cross. If you're somewhat familiar with that exercise. If you're not, you can Google it, but it has to do with like low back movement. You could do some prone props or prone press ups. Those two are really good for a lot of times deadlifts. Like you hear people and they'll talk about like, oh yeah, I herniated a disc whenever I was deadlifting. It's not to scare you. It's usually, it can be faulty form. Could be they loaded the bar too much. Could be they were really stressed and then they try to do a heavy lift and they hurt themselves. So try to move the spine in some other ways. Try to go into some more like extension. So like leaning back could really help. So doing those prone press ups, prone props. Try to go left and right with those prone props. If you're not familiar with these exercises, right, just Google them. They're all over the internet. And then with that, don't neglect your other joints. So sometimes what can happen is you hurt your back, but the real culprit is some muscular imbalance in the hips or in the ankles, even, which you might be like, what? But don't neglect those. Try doing a program where you're doing a lot of unilateral work and you're moving like left to right rather than forward to back. Unilateral is like using one arm versus the other arm. So like a one arm row or a Bulgarian split squat or a lateral lunge or a curtsy lunge or any kind of lunge really, um, or a single leg deadlift or a single leg RDL, a single leg press. Any of those would be an example of a unilateral exercise. And what that can do is that can strengthen up any weak links within that chain because you're doing one leg versus the other leg. And so you're kind of addressing those imbalances. And so that can help to improve your strength and decrease any pain. And don't forget about mobility too. Try to get mobile before your workouts. Try to do something where you're moving around, especially those major joints like hip, spine, shoulder. Those are big culprits for movement imbalances and things. So try to get those moving, try to get blood flow to them prior to your actual lift. I hope this helps. I hope this kind of calms you down surrounding the deadlift. And if you want to follow me, I'm on Instagram at Coach Mike Payton, Facebook, Michael Payton, and on YouTube, also Coach Mike Payton.